So this was leg three of the journey, this European part. So I've decided to go solo at this point now. And that meant like now I have to carry everything that I needed. I felt I was being racially profiled. He's a black man who's going through this country, and let's stop him. I really did feel like an illegal immigrant. I was overwhelmed with emotion, really, really overwhelmed, and tears in my eyes. And that's where I saw my sister, my twin sister, for the first time.
Finishing that African leg, what did that feel like? And then talk to me about flying over to Europe and starting that European leg.
Yeah, I felt really energized finishing Africa. Really energized. I was happy that I finished um, because of so many challenges.
Just a little bit, just
That,
a few.
yeah, part of it is it felt, yeah, it was incredible to finish and just be able to get to, because I had been running, but I wasn't on anywhere near water. The last part I'd been close to water was by Lake Victoria in Uganda and Tanzania, and just coming to the sea at the top of Africa in Alexandria. That felt so incredible to even just see, to be able to see the sea and water. It just felt really refreshing. Yeah.
I can imagine it, you know. I mean, I say I can imagine it. I can't imagine that feeling. Obviously, like I feel like you're the one man on the planet that probably can imagine that feeling, because I would imagine it was a point that you were thinking of in the journey. At the start of the journey, you were thinking, probably when I get to the top of Africa, that is going to be kind of a big part of this complete. But you obviously wouldn't have foreseen everything that happens then within from the bottom to the top of Africa. So yeah, I would imagine seeing that water was probably an amazing, a humbling, a reflective experience. Something that you probably could only maybe relate to the finish, I would imagine. That was kind of like, were those two kind of relatable? Can you feel similarities between those two?
Yeah, I could definitely feel the similarities. Part of it, I actually say I didn't see water because I was seeing water. I was running along the Nile, the River Nile, but because of the humidity of that running in the conditions I was in, it felt like it didn't feel fresh. But by the time I got to the really top of Africa, you feel the freshness, but also I think the euphoria of knowing that I had completed um, the biggest part of the whole journey. It just felt like, you feel a bit more like invincible in a way. Um, but I know that there was an extra part of the journey which is still going on. And But it felt a bit more like, you know what, I'm going into Europe. It should be a little bit more smoother moving forward, and I don't have to worry too much about border crossings as much as I was through Africa.
Reflecting back on Africa, like you say, and then realizing that yes, it's not done yet. Like there's still a serious amount of miles to put in here. Um, you almost said it there, but like, was there a point that you had to remind yourself, okay, we've still got a long way to go. Like this still isn't over.
Yeah, it's looking, because I was always more in case of like I'm trying to do each day as it comes. But when you break down and just look further, see, right, okay, there's still quite a lot of kilometers to go before I can actually finish. So the journey is still going until I actually get into London. There's still a long way to go.
Okay, so you then get on the flight, you head over to Europe. Talk me through landing in Europe, and then again, let's break this down in terms of the first couple of weeks, getting going again in Europe? What's the feeling like? I'm sure the excitement's building that, you know, it's weird to say close to the finish line because you're not close to the finish line. You've got a hell of a long way to go. But what is your internal feeling at that time?
There I felt relieved in the case that one, I finished the biggest part of the journey, um, and then I felt anxiety as well, and the anxiety. There's still a lot of the unknown coming up. There's still challenges I still have to go through. Um, Anxiety coming from the case that uh, I have the Schengen visa issue that I was dealing with that have 90 days to be in Europe. And how am I going to complete that 90 days? Of course, there's parts of Europe which are not within the Schengen visa, which gave me some kind of relief, knowingly that I didn't have to go all out. Um, to try to complete it because it would have been not possible to do that. So Balkan countries were a relief for me because knowingly that I'm going to go through them. But Greece was one part of Europe which is part of the Schengen visa. So one, I think I took about 5 days off in Greece before I can restart again to try and enjoy the being within the city again, some food, because then I can be able to I was able to have vegan food nicely and go to a restaurant, be close to the beach. And Alice was there as well with me. Um, and then also the Adidas Runners community as well, they were there to support and aid. So when I did kick off, I started with part of the Adidas Runners community to guide me through through Greece and so through Athens. But I started at the port in Athens, where again there's a issue of migration because people that's where an entry point for a lot of migrants, especially coming from the side of the Middle East. That's where they enter from, and that's where I started from. So I was basically following a route that they go through to once they enter Europe, and they go up north to go into other countries of Europe. So yeah, that was some of the feelings I had once I started.
We get out of Greece, we move through then the like I say, quote unquote, final part of the journey through Europe. Talk me through, as you did through Africa, that journey and the challenges you faced, because I know there were some. So how did that final part of the journey go to to London? And we'll talk about the finish, of course.
Yeah, so this was leg three of the journey, this European part. So I've decided to go solo at this point now. And that meant like now I have to carry everything that I needed with me in a backpack, quite a heavy backpack because now I was carrying everything: a tent, cooking things, sleeping bags, and anything that needed clothes and so on. So all of that was I had it on me on my back. Um, and then so it meant like I actually wasn't running; I was more hiking now. So I did more of a hike going through Greece. And Greece was very refreshing because I was now going along the coast of Greece. So I feel a bit more relaxed, but obviously the anxiety of issues, logistics, and everything else is still going on. Um, but I was more relaxed and a little bit more chilled. So I go and I can be able to deal with the situations a bit more easier. But then once I got into Albania, actually saying that before getting to Albania, I managed to visit a refugee camp. Not actually going to the refugee camp, but I visited the refugee camp outside, and by going through a charity called Secondary, who were able to advise me with some more information on how refugees, once they enter Europe, the issues they have to deal with, and the problems, and how they assist them and support them to be able to feel at home, because usually they don't feel at home when they go into this country. So that part of that also gave me a bit more of understanding, and gave me a bit more of a reason to actually to understand, as person traveling solo for Europe, what issues they face. So once I get into Albania, the border crossing was fairly smooth. I think I wasn't there for very long. But this is where the language barrier came into play much more. Um, Issues with the language and trying to explain myself. Because now, when I was in Europe, I was had either, if I didn't speak the language, my driver was able to speak the language, so we were able to bounce off each other like that and get information. But now I'm myself, and I have to be explaining. I'm using Google Translate a lot more. There are people that speak English, but some it's limited. Um, and going solo now, we're planning the route a lot uh, more ways of safety concern as well. So not to overly go off to a case into a very remote place, or not to be too much onto roads which are very busy, um, because I had no other support. But Albania was beautiful, was nice, and is one of those undiscovered countries which are extremely incredible. The people were very welcoming, which was a surprise, and which was a really nice discovery. From Albania, then I get into Montenegro. Luckily enough, it was a very small country, so I didn't spend too much time there. Um, but then I was dealing with issues of rain. And when I got into Montenegro, it was raining a lot, so I didn't spend any time outside unless I was moving to go anywhere else. And then from Montenegro, I believe I went into, I think I'm forgetting now,
It's
Albania.
amazing how it must be
Yeah,
such a blur. It must
yeah,
like you just remembering that. It genuinely must be. And I was just thinking then when you were talking about it, like it must feel almost overwhelming for you to reflect on this journey and how many countries you went through, how far it was, all of the experiences, just to digest it all. Do you think you're even close to that at this point, or do you think that's going to take a while?
it's gonna take a while to be able to digest it properly. Because even if now, I end up something comes up and I end up remembering a certain point or something that did happen, and then I really think, oh my gosh, that did happen that time on, oh, I experienced this. So it keeps coming back to me. So over so often. Yeah.
It must be really odd. And I would imagine sometimes you're lying there at night time and you're thinking, how how have I not remembered that? Like how have I not talked about that? Because these little things that I would imagine at the time became day to day problems, things that you have to sort, those logistical things that we've kind of already talked about, you you kind of just do it and move on, do it and move on, do it and move on. And now it's like you're remembering every little thing and the book's going to
Yeah.
be very thick, is what I'd say, isn't it? The book is going to be very
Yeah.
very thick. So we're
Yeah.
through we're through Montenegro.
Yeah.
Where are we headed then?
Yeah. So next up is Bosnia and Herzegovina. I always have difficult saying that name. um, but it's really beautiful. The climate is really nice, and I was really embracing and enjoying being in a climate that's not extremely hot and not um, too cold as well. So I was enjoying that part. But what I was enjoying wasn't enjoying so much is the difficulty of language. Um, and But it was nice to be in a different country by myself. I'm digesting a lot, trying to unpack a lot of things, and but it was nice for me to take that decision, make the decision to be solo. And through that part, didn't spend too much time in Bosnia, but now I was able to take a little bit more rest days to give me the opportunity to recover a lot more. So when I do reset into the European Schengen visa issue in Croatia, I can actually just be able to. My body feels much more fresh. I can be able to go. So having going through these countries, Albania, Montenegro, and Bosnia, they gave me that relief on my body, so I can be able to reset and go again. And they're not part of the Schengen visa. And but in Bosnia, because we had initially planned to spend more time in Bosnia and enter Croatia at the smallest point to cross through Croatia, but I realized while I was there is that the places were a lot more spread out in terms of towns or villages. So I was spending a lot of time on my feet without having anywhere to even just kind of like take a rest break while I'm out there moving. And places where had some creatures like there were snakes. I actually was walking around and seeing dangerous snakes, and it was I couldn't be able to just say I can pitch a tent here. Obviously, it's not that part. If I remember correctly, it wasn't allowed to pitch a tent in Bosnia, but because it was so spread out, I couldn't even say I can just do that because of the snakes. And so I decided to cut my journey in Bosnia much shorter and go into Croatia as quickly as I could do. And then in Croatia, I were able to have a little bit more option for a bit of different options of food, let's say, and because the northern part of Bosnia wasn't as closer together. So I get in there, and now in Croatia is where I really felt the heaviness of being a migrant. Even though I was affected in Albania and affected in Bosnia, and so in India, in Montenegro and Bosnia, where I was being stopped by the police and asked for to prove my entry into the country, if it's illegal or legal. So in Croatia, every single day I was being stopped by the police, on average like 3 times a day. I was stopped and questioned. Show me your passport. Once I showed them the passport, and they can see it's a British passport, then they will check whether it's authentic. And sometimes that just takes a bit of time because of the language barrier. Can't be fully explain what I'm doing, and I can't really fully show them, or they don't understand each other properly. So sometimes when I do somebody who speaks English, I can be able to explain properly. But sometimes I'm just like, I just don't want to deal with this.
Yeah.
I just want to show you the passport and I can go.
How do moments like that make you feel? Like how did that make you feel internally? Because yeah, I would imagine, part of the reason you're doing this is, and I've heard you say the words to end racism, and it feels like at times you were getting stopped because of the color of your skin and because of what you were doing. Like, how does that make you feel?
Yeah, I really did feel like an illegal immigrant and not wanted within the country or within those places I was going through every time I was being stopped. And it's not just because um, I was being stopped because I am walking on a road. It's because I felt I was being racially profiled. There's a black man is going through this country, and let's stop him. And just sometimes maybe I'm just sitting having a break. Is this place where I'm sitting is very much set up for people who are traveling to just stop there. and then a police car will come past, and you can see them, and I can tell they're going to go past, and they're going to turn around and come back, and just ask me questions. And that happened a lot. Every time I saw a police car, I know they're going to come back and ask me, or stop me and ask me for my passport. And yeah, that I really did feel like an illegal immigrant, and I'm really not wanted within the country. Um, and I fully understood what people were facing that do migrate. And they migrate not because they wanted to, they migrate because they're forced to have to do so. They have to go through the countries, and they really did get to have that feeling, or how they do feel.
And for you as well, you know, those moments must have been exhausting because, like you said, you knew it was going to happen. You were having a rest, and a police car would drive by, and at that time, you knew that they were going to turn around, and you knew that whole process of, you know, asking what you're doing, to see your documentation, that thing that's happened over and over and over and over again. It must have become exhausting.
I was on edge all the time. I was like on extreme edge all the time. Every time I wake up, I'm like, oh gosh, I have to go through this whole process again. Um, I'm, I was constantly looking over my shoulder. I felt like, like, uh, like I've done a crime that I haven't actually done. Um, so constantly having to look over my shoulder, like is there the police there? If I do see a police ahead of me, do I just go, or do I just try to take a different route? Just because I don't want to have to deal with them, and not because I've done something wrong. I just don't want to have to deal with them. But if I do try to take a different route, they will definitely stop me because they think I'm trying to, run away from them. So I just have to go ahead and just deal with the issue.
So we get through Croatia, you know, we get through those issues that we faced in that country. Where is next, and what is the next portion of the journey?
The next country was Slovenia. And through Slovenia, this is where things became much better and much more relaxed. Um, Although it started to become colder now, but it was started to feel more relaxed. So I wasn't being stopped by the police. I think I only got stopped twice, and when I did get stopped, they were a bit more friendlier, towards me, and they understood what I was doing because when I explained it. Then I was being joined by people once I got into, Ljubljana. I had people start to join me and assist me, and then I was, people. These are people that actually were just following me online, and they realized that I was going through their country, and they messaged me, with the message, Alice and the, Ben in the team, and they say, look, we want to support, any way we can. So I had like, some really wonderful people just come along, and they would run with me, for the country. So things started to feel more relaxed. And part of that also is the issue with language barrier. So they took that away from me, not having to explain to myself. They can be able to give me some more information on how to deal with things within the country, and also they can be able to explain to people.
Just, I guess, for reference at this point, where you are in this point of the conversation, how far are we still from London, and what time of the year are we kind of sitting around at the moment?
So for reference, I still had, I think, about 1,000 kilometers to go, to get to the UK. Um, and it's still, yeah, still quite a long way. I still had going. Um, and within the time of the year, it was around October time. Yeah, that was around October. So this by now, I'm more of a push to, because I re-entered the Schengen visa countries. Like once I entered Croatia, So I'm more like now you need to really push and go on. So then from there is getting to Austria. Um, Austria, the biggest challenge for me was going through the Austrian Alps, and that was the biggest worry for Europe, and how we're going to tackle that, and what we're going to deal with the situations. Me being solo, and the time of the year, which is one I could get there and there's snow covered, or I could get there and it's nice. And but we're trying to prepare for the worst conditions.
And what was that journey through Austria like?
Through Austria, and I was extremely surprised by how welcoming everybody was, and I was extremely surprised how nice and beautiful the country is. Um, and the weather also played in my favor, which was a massive surprise because I didn't anticipate the weather to be nice. And um, so it didn't end up snowing while I was in the Alps, luckily enough. It was still really cold, so I'd like layers, every single layer of my clothes. I was wearing it to run through the Alps. But then I was now being joined and supported by the Austrian community. Um, this gentleman who was American, that lives in Austria now. His name is Josh. He realized that I was going through his backyard, and he just gathered a lot of people together, and he came and crewed me. Him and his kids. They took the whole weekend off and just came and crewed me, which is incredible, and supported me through the Alps. And he was able to gather like other people within Austria and say, "Look, I'm coming through here. Can you be able to give me somewhere to stay um, and host me?" And it made things a lot more easier, made the whole experience nicer. And that kind of like got the ball rolling for the rest of the journey in terms of people coming and supporting me, um, which made like once I entered Germany, when I entered Germany, by the way, like now going into this part of Europe, the borders are no longer existent because once I'm crossing the borders and there's nothing to indicate there's a border there apart from a sign on the side of the road to say that you're crossing into a different country. Um, and that there was a big contrast between the two continents. And and that was evident for me. But then I'm getting a lot more support now. People are hosting me. People are now like coming out and saying, "Look, I can join you for this part of the journey. I can assist you here." Because so part of the humanity, I was able to see how people can come together for a bigger cause, and it was extremely refreshing to get that, and especially for Germany. Because again, I had another gentleman called Shannon who took a whole week off work to come and join me and crew me and carry my stuff to get me out of as close as possible to my finish as possible. Yeah, so it was really beautiful through that part. Yeah.
It you mentioned the contrast, but at the same time, it's like you've you've been on this journey for so long. You've had so many ups and so many downs, but at this point in the journey, yes, you've still got hundreds of kilometers left to the quote unquote finish line. However, I would imagine you're almost in a space where you're like, I'm not sure if I want this to be finished yet, because I'm you're seeing all this hospitality, you're enjoying, I would imagine, the days with less stress and thinking about the actual running on a day-to-day basis a little bit more. Were you enjoying it? Were you ready for it to be done? Or were you kind of in the space where you were like, oh, I don't quite want it to be over just yet?
Yeah, it was difficult to think in terms of finishing. Um, I was really enjoying the experience, enjoying the atmosphere, uh, but knowingly that my visa restriction was really looming. It was difficult to really embrace and take the time because I really wanted to have a little bit more extra time in some places to like just at least take a day off and enjoy that time. I say, wow, I'm in this country. I may not be back again, but I just had to keep moving. Yeah, so I was like, I want to spend a bit more time here, but I can't because of this reason. And also the weather conditions. I was spending like 8 hours, sometimes 12 hours outside, and like, ah man, it's too cold now to be outside. Yeah.
Take me back to 51 degrees.
Yes.
Um, um, that final mainland Europe section of this, then before we kind of get back over into the UK, talk to me, just talk me through that final mainland Europe section before you get back to the United Kingdom.
Mm. Yeah. So from Germany, which was quite the biggest part of Europe. I was running through Germany. Um, and then that's when it's actually in Germany is where it snowed, and I was running through snow.
I got all the way
And
through Austria without this.
yeah, and it started snowing in Germany. It's like, oh gosh, this is really cold. So I decided to a lot more colder weather, running through snow, really high winds, really high cold winds. And so from Germany, I went into Luxembourg. Um, and Luxembourg is super tiny country. So I didn't even spend a night in Luxembourg. It was basically I just went straight through. But I was hosted again at the border, a border in Germany, and Luxembourg by a South African couple, which was a really refreshing fact to see. It's like I come so far all the way from South Africa and now meeting each other from South Africa in a completely different country. And they hosted me, and it was beautiful. I had a good conversation, um, and then I carried on into Belgium. And in Belgium, I I it was very cold. I really feeling the coldness while I'm running through these countries now, and it's part of the reason why I was like, I just want to finish because of the amount of time I'm spending outside. Um, Even though I'm enjoying these experiences, is that my body was also starting to feel the the toll of how much I've done. Um, Starting to feel much more tired, and I'm not moving as much or as quickly as if I wanted to for these countries. But the hospitality and the beautiful humans I was meeting along the way, and the messages I was receiving from the wider world, because that now I was really feeling the support from everybody. And for Germany, so for Belgium, so I finished Belgium and I going to France. Um, and in France, this is where, because I was spending 3 days in France, I believe, yeah, in 3 days in France before I can get into Cali, the last part before going to the UK, and that is where I got the injury um, on my back on my hip, and that's where it was. I realized how much my body couldn't take anymore of the journey. Um, and I didn't know what the injury was. I couldn't figure it out. So, uh, and it was really difficult to move. Um, really difficult. But luckily, again, at this point where I felt like probably it might be game over, even though I didn't want it to be because of the injury. I got support from the community. I had two of my friends from the Adidas running community. They had come from Paris and they came all the way to where did they come to? I think they came to Mons. No, sorry, not Mons. They came to Lille in France. They came to Lille and they met me there, and we were able to say they're going to come with me all the way to Cali and support me and go with me. So they were saying, look, don't stress, don't worry, it's okay. We are going to try and get there. We're going to support you in any way that you need to be able to get you there. So I stopped running and it's just more walking. Try and do as much mileage as possible within the day to try and divide up to get to Cali on the days I needed to get there. Because I had planned to get to Cali by the 20th. And on the 20th is the actual deadline for the Schengen visa. So any longer than that, it will be too difficult to exit the country. Fortunately, I managed to make it, and this is through sheer determination and support from the friends, and I'm really grateful for them. Renee, Rain, and Sofiane, who came from France. They were, yeah, they pushed me. They really got me through this part, which was extremely difficult because we was walking through the night time at night on roads which had no light at all. Um, and we just got head torches and trying to see where we go, where we're stepping, and the roads are very narrow. And so we go to all these trucks coming past and cars at high speed. And we are there trying to walk on this road at nighttime um, to try to get to the destination that we need to get to in those conditions where it's also really cold. Yeah, it was difficult, but I managed to get to Cali, and Cali. This is we had booked obviously the ferry in advance, so missing the ferry meant that I had to spend probably another day in the country, and that would have caused a lot more issues. So there was no option to miss this ferry. Um, so got there, managed to get this ferry just in time, literally just in time. I think I arrived at 5 o'clock when the ferry was supposed to leave at seven,
Well,
7.
how stressful.
And this was the last
Very
ferry.
stressful.
Yeah, it was the last ferry that was available. Um, yeah, I got on it and I got into Dover, and in Dover I met the London community who had been organized in the background, but Alice was really organizing everything and just making sure that it's broken down in the right way and really, really going into the nitty gritty details and making sure that I sort of don't have to take on too much of the burden of the actual last part of the journey to finish. So the guys had broken down the who's gonna meet me at certain stage, and then they would change over every now and then for the last 3 days from Dover. So I had vibes kind of all the way through London, sorry, to London. Um, I was just walking, of course, because I couldn't do any running. But I think this is how it's supposed to be. Just yeah, just to kind of walk and continue to the rest of the journey.
It feels like you say, it almost feels meant to be put through all of what you went through. It, you know, from everything that people will have heard in this podcast and will have listened to, the challenges that you faced, the hurt that you faced, every part of this journey leading to that finish line in London feels like it was almost meant to happen, and I would imagine has made the journey, even though there were incredibly stressful times that you never thought this was going to get done, even but all of those times have added up to make this journey even more special and to get you to that finish line. And I know there are a hell of a lot of people involved as well to help that happen. It's weird to say that from Dover to London is your last 100 meters, but in some ways, like it, in terms of distance, it almost is that. In terms of time, in terms of one foot in front of the other, did it feel like a long few days, or did it feel like it went by very quickly?
It felt a long few days
Yeah,
because it was still 135 kilometers
yeah,
to get through, and breaking it down, like over 3 days. It's still quite a challenge because the plan is that we finish on the 22nd of December and try to make sure you get there on the 22nd of December. But again, have a time restriction when to get there to get to where I needed to get to, because there's people waiting for me to celebrate, and wanted to make sure that I do get there when they're there and not to get there at nighttime. Um, so that pressure was still there, and but the guys that did meet me and they were supporting me along the way on those days, they made it a lot more easier and smoother and enjoyable, because otherwise I would have been extremely stressed if I was doing it by myself. And yeah, it was beautiful being able to get that support. Basically, not just that part of the UK, but for that whole part of Europe
yeah.
that got that support. It was really beautiful.
Okay, let's get to it, the finish line, because it's been there in your brain for, you were out there for 518 days, right? Um, what was the overall distance that you covered?
Overall distance 13,245 kilometers, which is 8,230 miles
So
altogether.
for that, that's just insane to say out loud, isn't it? For that whole period of time, for all of those distance, or for all of that distance, you've been thinking about this moment. It must be really, really, really difficult to comprehend. But
Well,
try and put into words what those final steps were like. Tell us where the finish
well,
line was, the reason that the finish line was there, and um, yeah, your emotions at that time.
ah,
Yeah, I knew it was going to start like that.
yeah, this I thought about it for so long, um, but I don't think I ever imagined the emotions properly of how it would feel for me, because you think, okay, this is how it's going to happen and what you're going to feel, and but you don't actually realize until you get there. And for me, when I stayed, it was 20 kilometers, 21 kilometers from Greenwich, where I'd starting for the last day to get into the riverside in Hammersmith, where the finish point is. But along the way is basically the one of the stop point was like Downing Street, to stop there, and then continue to Hammersmith. And the community had come and gathered to support me. So from the start point, I had a bunch of people who were there, and yeah, just being able to go and see them, it felt so. I felt immense joy, but also a lot of emotions attached to it. A lot of mixed emotions, knowing that how much I've gone through to get to this point, and just being able to see London as well. Um, that sense of familiar, being in a familiar place, but also feels quite strange now, being back. And so yeah, just kind of like being able to walk through with all this people, community, the people that have been supporting me along. the whole journey. We go together and finish this thing off together. Because this is what it's all been about, is that even though it's just me running and undertaking this whole journey, is we are all doing it together, um, for the greater good. And I get to Downing Street. Um, for some reason, even though I knew there was people that were going to be waiting for me at Downing Street, I had completely forgotten about this, that there's going to be people. When I got to Downing Street and I saw a big group of people there and cheering and joining and with flags of Uganda, and banners of like Captain to London, I was overwhelmed with emotion. Um, really, really overwhelmed, and tears in my eyes. And that's where I saw my sister, my twin sister, for the first time since I started the journey. Um, that was, yeah, that really hit me hard. Um, yeah, it really hit me hard, that moment, and being able to hug her and but with the embrace of everybody that was there. Um, yeah, so then once continuing the journey to get to Hammersmith, um, we had I was joyful, vibes and enjoyment. People saying that what's going on here? This person's traveling through, and I'm going past the Mall, Buckingham Palace, and walking down to through Hyde Park, and these all places which were so familiar and where I ran through so many years. It feels so comforting at the same time, to be back and be able to go on all these footsteps and so on. And I can actually realize how nice, the environment or the roads that we run on, how nice they are compared to what I've been running on. How easy do kind of have it, to be able to in London and the UK pretty much. How easy it is for a person who's running, how easy it is for them to be able to do that. And getting to Hammersmith, um, uh, I had a message to say that my mom wanted to join me for the last set, to get into the finish point. And I got there, and then she joined, uh, being able to hug my brother as well, who was there. It was an overwhelm of emotions, real overwhelm of emotions with so many other people to celebrate this finish line, um, to the rightful finish line, and get to cross over and finish at that point. Because the reason of choosing to finish there was very much, more of having a hub for us to finish and celebrate rather than just finishing in a random place. But because that studio itself was very much a hub for black and brown people, for them to feel, welcomed and supported as they do their arts, in London. And they had like musicians go through there, artists and so many other poets and so on, that have been felt safe, to be able to do what they do, and it's been a celebrated point through history, especially in the 80s. And it felt really beautiful to be able to finish there, knowingly that it's been a hub for a lot of black and brown people. Um, being there and feeling represented, and not feel like the outcasts, and not feel like they're not being celebrated. So that was the reason why I ended up finishing at that point. So felt really, really, yeah. But the emotions themselves were just overwhelming.
Mate, I wanna say thank you so much for your time, because I know we've gone probably a lot longer than we were expecting to, but I I I wanted to give it the space that it deserves, and um I really appreciate you taking the time to sit with us and break the whole journey down. The videos, the photos, everything that's on your Instagram of that finish. If anybody listening to this hasn't seen it, I don't know where you've been. I don't know how you've missed it, but if you haven't seen some of the finish line stuff, it is, yeah, it's unbelievable. And to kind of, I think, to see that and then to have heard about the whole journey and to be able to listen to you speak about it's very obvious why the emotions were like they were, because of what you went through that well over 500 days. We're only, as we're speaking, 3 weeks removed or something like that from the finish of this. I wanted to give you kind of the final reflections on this episode, and I know it's going to be difficult to kind of reflect back on what was an over 500-day journey, but looking at it at this point, and I know this is going to change over time, over the months and the years that you reflect on this, what are your reflections of this entire journey?
Yeah, it's quite difficult because, like we said earlier on, there's things that do come back, and I'm like, whoa, okay, there's that part and there's that part. But I think the biggest reflection is how much we see on media and so on of how the world is in disarray, and this is going on, and destruction here and so on. But humanity is incredible. Humanity is so beautiful. People are super welcoming and super friendly. Um, Especially in Africa, where we get a lot of negativity, um, you feel extremely at home. Um, I feel extremely at home in all the countries that I was going through that are not my native countries. And yeah, it's the most beautiful part of this whole journey is humanity and how much we can come together for each other, and how much love there is there. And there's much more love than hate. Um, and additionally, on top of that, because this is the migration journey that I've been highlighting, is that when somebody is either they migrate for opportunity or they migrate for climate reasons, because climate migration is a big issue. They're forced to have to migrate because of war and conflict and all these other things. Is that when they do migrate, is that it's not just them that are migrating and they move. Is that when they do migrate, they will leave parts of their life behind, and leaving that part of their life is leaving their families and loved ones, or they're leaving the community they've grown up in and they go somewhere else. So it's not just them migrating, but they are also their loved ones which are left behind. They're also mentally migrating with them. So they're always there in the background. They're always they have the same worries as you do as a person who's migrating. They have the same problems, the same issues. For me, I do know that when I was on this journey and moving, even though the journey hasn't finished, saying that, like, even though I finished and go to the finishing point, I'm still having to do a lot of reflection, deal with a lot of things that now I need to sort out. Is that your loved ones are also on the journey with you. I knew that me, especially being in prison, Alice, my family and so on, they were living the whole experience and the worries and the scare, how scared they were as well. It's evident. So you're never alone, and two is that you're migrating with all these other people. It's not just you.